you guys had a good time. So it looks like, okay, great. You guys hear me, or is this like mic? Hey. No, I don't know.
Well, actually, yeah, we recorded. So.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so this actually post-show conversation is being live streamed, fed.
Yes, recorded for online.
Yes. Awesome. So, it looks like I'm moderating, which is awesome. Because Frank actually usually moderates, but he's had a long day and with the Fulbright folks. So, thank you all for being here and for participating in this story exchange. And I'm just going to basically just sort of talk to each of these amazing people. For those of you who don't know, this is Camila Forbes. She actually directed tonight's event. So all of the shapes and visuals and pacing, that was all her. And so, and she actually held it down all day. She's been here since 10 o'clock this morning, rehearsing until 6 or 5:45. I'm just going to actually have each playwright just sort of introduce themselves and sort of just shape any kind of language you want around the play that the excerpt we just heard. So we can start with Christina.
We always start with me.
Your last name is Anderson.
Anderson, yes. Oh, I'm mic'd. Look at that.
Yes,
I hear I'm not used to the mic action. Hi, everybody. I'm Christina Anderson. I wrote the Ashes Under Gait City, and it's G-A-I-T City. And the play started for me because I was commissioned to write a play by a theater company, Portland Playhouse, in Portland, Oregon. And as I was doing research about it, I came across the exclusionary laws that were on the books in Oregon. And it basically banned Black people from living in the state of Oregon. And it started, I believe, I used to know this history when I was doing a bunch of the press stuff, and now the dates are kind of losing me. But it got started in like 1896, I believe. Do people know this stuff? And they banned Black people from living in the state, and there are different reasons behind why the decision was made. Like, I was doing research, and one story that I heard was that there was growing tension between African Americans and Native Americans, and because the Native Americans were there first, it was easy to get rid of the Black people. I heard that they didn't want to come down on any decision about slavery at the time. So they were preventing Black people from living there, so that way they wouldn't have to deal with people trying to come up north and like all these things. So I heard all these different stories about the history, and I thought it was so fascinating because my present day understanding of Oregon and the Pacific Northwest is that there are very few Black people living there. And it's a false assumption because it's a lively community there. They have a long history. And so I just thought it was so fascinating that a decision that a state could make decades prior could then affect our present day assumption about that location. And as I was digging and doing more research about that time period, it was so fascinating too, because like, even though they had this law in the books, there were still Black people in Oregon, obviously, who were like procreating and creating families and such. So it was still like a vital and live community. When rich white people came down from Canada or came up from different parts of America, they showed their wealth by having Black butlers and people taking care of them. And so Black people were a commodity and also showed your power that you could defy the law. And so that's how they maintained like a Black population during that time period. So I was like, wow, like there needs to be like discussion about that history. And so I knew I wanted to write a present day play and sort of talk about, how that history can affect a city. So I've made up this narrative. It's a fictitious city, Gate City. And they have this very long and complicated history with Black people in Gate City, which is also true for a lot of cities in Portland and also the state of Washington. There were sundown laws. There was just immense amount of terror. So even when the population in Portland did rise in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, the KKK chased them out. So that's why the population in South Central LA jumped up in like California. So I was just really interested in like the history of the Pacific Northwest. And so just an offshoot, I was really interested in creating like a guru kind of person, and also looking at Black cults. So I was trying to figure out, how do I put Black cults with the Pacific Northwest? Yeah, they're super huge in the West Coast. And when I was living in San Francisco, I met a lot of Black people who grew up in like Black communes, and just were living in really kind of like alternative, lifestyles and communities. I'm from Kansas. I've been on the East Coast since '99, and I have yet to meet a Black person from New York who grew up in a commune. I was just meeting a lot of like cool Black people while I was living in San Francisco in the Pacific Northwest. And so I wanted to have a cult leader, and that's who Simone the Believer is. When I was doing research about cult plays, like usually, we the audience see it as a cult, and then we can watch these people sort of get duped and fall into it. But when I started working on the play, I knew that I wanted us to watch this thing happen. So at the end, when it gets super creepy and weird, and Simone gets kind of manipulative, we can be like, wait, but she's supposed to be a revolutionary, So that's essentially what the play is. And there's a lot of humor, and there's a lot of, there are no white people in it, which I think is hilarious because it's in Oregon. And that was a conscious decision, and I was really interested too in that, you have, even though the city's fictitious, the population is 90% white, but we learn about the entire history of this play through Black people, which was a purposeful choice on my part. So yeah, that's essentially the play world in a nutshell.
I'm sure we'll come back with more cues. Lynn?
I was gonna, but I guess I might. The impulse is to take the mic. Well, I guess the book of social. Hi, I'm Lynn Nottage, and the book of social usage, which was the first piece, is mine, and it comes from a deeply personal place. And so I didn't do a lot of research other than sort of to dig back into my memory of my mother and my grandmother and aunt, who were really the women who shaped me, and women who in many ways remained somewhat enigmatic because they weren't, they were big talkers, but they didn't really talk about personal feelings. And so I wanted to just dig in and find out who they were. My grandmother, who was an incredibly charismatic person who based on, was someone who very badly wanted to be a member of clubs. And she was a member of clubs, and that really defined and shaped who she was as a person. And as a result, my mother became a member of clubs, and then they wanted me to become a member of clubs. And I think that in some ways my life is designed in opposition to not wanting to be a member of clubs, but trying to understand why it was so important to them at that time. The play takes place in 1954, and it's a time period that really sort of launched my career with a play called Crumbs from the Table of Joy. And I think in that play, in some ways, I was trying to investigate some of the women in my life. And I think that this now is a much more honest investigation of those women because they are them. And in many ways, it's been a very difficult play for me to write. And I've sort of been writing around it and trying to find a vocabulary and trying to find a way in. And so when Keith said he was putting together these series, I thought maybe this is the time just to jot something down and be brave and put it in front of an audience and just see how people react. So I don't know ultimately what it's going to be. I know where it's going, if that makes sense, but I don't know whether this is ultimately going to be the shape and that it takes in the end. But I know that it absolutely is going to have these 4 characters.
Awesome. We'll come back with more cues for you too, Lynn. Alex?
Thanks. I'm Alexander Thomas. My play is called, right now, again, it's called Schwarz Gemacht, or How Klaus Found His Blackness. Schwarz Gemacht is German for made black. And first of all, I'm really honored to be here. Thank you, Keith, for inviting me in.
Of course. You're the dude. What are you talking about?
It really, the seed for this started about 10 years ago when my wife is German, and we were newly married then, and I was looking through this yearbook of hers, high school yearbook, and there was a picture of a black girl, and I said, who is she? And I made all these assumptions that now I'm totally embarrassed to have made, which are what you hear coming out of Maurice's mouth. Where are you from? Where is she from? Africa? Well, and I was convinced that she could not be German, and my wife was pulling her hair out to convince me she was German, as far as I know. She spoke German. She acted like every other German kid. And I said, well, how long have Black people been in Germany? And she didn't know, and nobody knew. And I started researching, and I found way more information than I expected to find. One was this book called Other Germans by Tina Camp, who, and she had these interviews with Black Germans who were still alive. She had two, really, and that she had these sort of personal verbatim texts is what really moved me, because, and I really wanted to do a piece about identity, not about Nazis. I have in the play, I expressly say in the notes, no swastikas, no German Nazi decor. You know, it's sort of the look I want is from the expressionistic film era and this sort of lights and shadows. And because one of the amazing things I found out was this life in films that a number of Black people had. Klaus is very, very, I won't even say he's inspired by the career of this Black actor named Louis Brody, who worked from 1915 to 1952, all through the Expressionistic era and all through the Nazi era, where he did these sort of propaganda films, and then back to where in the late 40s and 50s. And also inspired by this man named Hans Holk, who was one of the people that Tina Camp interviewed. And his sort of pride for being German really moved me a lot. That he didn't want to be identified as anything else. And so that went to Klaus. And it started out as a 10-minute monologue that I did, which actually, I think you saw that years ago. And
Highways in Santa Monica,
yeah, that's
California.
right. Whoa, yeah. And then it sort of morphed into the two-man piece. Actually, Maurice came out of me doing an exercise. I had a suggestion from someone to do an exercise to get the voice that the character was talking to, create this, who he's talking to. And I said, oh, he's actually pretty full. And so that became Maurice. And then from that, people wanted to see, well, where does Klaus go after he leaves the bar? And it sort of developed from there. So I feel like I'm talking too much.
No, you're not talking too much. But I do, I'm gonna actually invite you guys to ask some questions. So hold on to those questions, jot those questions down. But I do want Alex to talk just very briefly about the history of the Black experience in Germany. If you can just sort of summarize that for those who don't know, because I know all of you are educated, smart people, but some things we don't know.
Yeah, well, Germany had African colonies in Namibia, Southwest Africa, and a lot of them, actually, what blew me away, I mean, they brought a lot of, they would send over people to, they would actually send over African professors to teach language in Germany to the Germans who were going over to work. So I thought, wow, you had Black professors teaching white Germans at a time in America where that's one of the things that I really sort of wanted to get across. Like, I don't know if you were Black and living in Berlin in the 1920s and you looked at America, you'd probably say, I'll stay here, you know. And but anyway, so yes, and I reference in this scene a little bit about what they call the Rhineland bastards, and those were children that were born during the first World War. The French sent over their African soldiers. They had these French African soldiers that fought, just like the German had the Ascari soldiers and the French sent over their soldiers, and they occupied the Rhineland. And they made a lot of babies while they were doing that. They met German women, and they hated these children. And what was so odd and why it's so convoluted and contradictory, if you were a mixed race, black mixed race person, not born of that Rhineland era, which my character is not, he's older than that, you were sort of okay. But these children were really marked, and they had sterilization, unofficial sterilization programs for them. It was very hard to get information about it because it wasn't on the books, but it was there. And actually last year, I got to meet this actor named Theodore Michael, who is who's 80, I think he's 86 now, and he lived through that whole period. And he said as a child, he growing up as a teenager, he never went to a doctor. He had all kinds of conditions, and he didn't go because he was afraid of being sterilized. And yeah.
Well, I'm going to open it up because I'm sure people have more questions than I want you to. So, for anyone with any questions for any of the playwrights and/or Camila who helped shape this evening.
And just because we're archiving this, if everyone can just hold the microphone very close.
Got it. Thank you. First, I'd just like to say incredible work to all of you. It was so beautiful and layered and just amazing. It's not so much as a question as I wanted to say I loved to see in all three plays the conversations that happen among us, that we don't always agree on everything, that there are levels to the things that we have dissent on or that we are debating on, whether it be in your play, Lynn, with the social status and what that means, how much that means to one woman versus another, to your play, Christina, with real estate and how the conversations that happen around that, to identity versus with American blacks versus black people who descend from other countries. And we just don't see it enough. And so I want to applaud you for including race within your topics, but not so much as how you relate to white people, but how we relate to each other within the confines of race. So thank you.
It's okay to ask a question.
Mr. Thomas, I have a graduate student who's doing a dissertation, one part of which involves a concept from the 19th century in America called Afro-Mandingoism. And I was interested when the term Mandingo showed up in the dialogue in here in the 1920s, and I wondered, did you come across it in your research? Or
Every word, every slang, I've been through this countless times. I looked up every bit of slang word used, yes, and yes, poontang was used, and yes, mojo was used. Those are all the ones that people were bothered by, and Mandingo, yeah.
I might send him to see you.
Yeah. What?
I might send my
Okay, go ahead.
student to see you about it.
Love it.
I also share that feeling of applauding, and also just a feeling of gratitude to it's really stunning how foreign it is to see so much Black work. It's stunning to me. I sat there and I was like, wow, I don't see this produced. And it's like there's a pain, but it's a stun sort of pain. So there's a gratitude that comes with the applause too. My question is about for the playwrights in your processes, has working in these realms shifted anything for you? Any former points of view about history, former points of view about your own families, your own self, your own relationship with these topics, specifically social order or Black people overseas or Black people in Oregon,
Everybody's looking at Christina.
I should have said like,
Yeah.
it was chilly.
I know, I am. Y'all wrote it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I mentioned earlier, just my assumptions about the history of Black folks in the Pacific Northwest, and funnily enough, like I've been writing more and more plays that are set in like Washington State. Often in all of my plays, I make up all the locations because they're usually sort of like a gumbo of different cities that I've lived in or I've done research in, because so I make it all up from scratch. But a lot of my most recent work is sort of exploring like Pacific Northwest history. So that's been like the biggest influence, for me in my process.
And I guess for me, every time I begin writing a play, it's an investigation, and I end up someplace that I didn't expect, and I feel that I get richer for having taken the journey.
Yeah, that's certainly true for me too, with this. And I've been, because of my wife's job, of moving over, when I met her, I didn't even have a passport now. Like Keith said, she's taking me away from that. I haven't lived here for the last 10 years. And it's really been eye-opening. As an African-American, been very eye-opening because Black people in different, just as America has its own sort of identity and reputation, so do African-Americans, because we really do tend to come across as if we own, we had Martin Luther King and we own issues of civil rights, and some people criticize us for that, For instance, there was this controversy in Germany a couple of years ago where a couple of theaters had done these productions using blackface, and it was a very big thing. And so the theater that worked on this play did a series of readings called Colorblind with a question mark to address these issues. And there was there was discussions about it. And in one particular, an actress there who's African-American kept referring to people in the African diaspora as African-Americans. And these other Black people were saying, we ain't American, get that through your head. And it was just this, and it took her like 3 or 4 times of being told that before she let that go, so it's really interesting for me, and that I hope that some of that is sort of addressed between Klaus and Maurice.
And I will say, even just working on all the plays, but truly your play in particular, Alex, today. And granted, we were just diving in and really just beginning to scratch the surface. But I had to check individually myself, my own assumptions that I brought to the characters, because I'm looking at the play through an American gaze, not necessarily a Black German gaze. So, we have advantages in other work in which, I can say as a director or as an artist, I am looking at this through a very specific lens, so therefore I have an edge. But with this, I was really surprised, like, oh wow, because I do share the same assumptions that Maurice came, to Klaus with, and had to dig a little bit deeper to understand the other perspective. So that was interesting for me.
All right, so maybe one more question.
We have some time.
Oh, we do. Okay, I wasn't sure, Frank. I didn't.
I do. Dovetailing on what Christina said about the Black people in Oregon, though, I do like that. Obviously, the 2 main characters in my play, Klaus Maurice, and I like having the play take place in Nazi Germany, where you see these 2 Black figures mostly. So.
Hello, excellent work. Thank you so much. I'm filled, as we all are, I'm sure. These plays are so important that tell a very important story about the Black diasporic experience. Where's their home? Where should these plays land to be told? How can they have an audience to get people to come see them and understand how important it is for them to see them? Where are the homes for these plays?
Well, I can speak to that.
I love Speak, brother.
Yes.
Speak. That's a producer. That's how
just want to say that, so in February, I've been given an incredible award from Time Warner to produce a pretty incredible new Black Fest in February. It's going to be like the 50th anniversary of Blackness.
Only 50 years?
Only 50 years. Civil rights was the big end. No, in all sincerity. Part of that festival that I'm now programming it will include Alex's play that I'm going to provide him at least 3 days of workshop preparation for a very informed presentation or reading or production, who knows. So that I can say that about that. These folks, her play was already produced, right? Yeah. So it's already had a life. Lynn's had amazing productions and continues to have productions. Camila is producing, and now she walks into theater companies and they ask her what she's interested in, and she tells them. And I think it's important for us, I think, to continue to support each other and to continue to advocate for each other as much as we can, so that way the larger community can see what we are invested in and see the amount of people who then become invested in what we're invested in. And of course, they will want to see that on the stage. So I think that we're also responsible for what we see on our stages. And if there isn't a theater to actually produce our work, then we find a place to make it happen. That's why I really like, the fact that Frank continues to support the New Black Fest and writers like Lynn and Christina and Alex, because he's giving a platform for an audience to support what we are invested in full time. This is our lives, so I'll say that.
No, that was great. Not at all.
I have 2 questions. One question is, in terms of the play about Germany, Mr. Thomas, why is the jazz musician the foil? And the second question is, for Miss Nottage, is the play set in Brooklyn because you mentioned down on Kingston, and is that Kingston Avenue? It reminds me of John Oliver Killen's The Cotillion.
Yeah. But to answer your question very quickly, the play is set in Brooklyn because it's based on my family that grew up in the Crown Heights, Bed-Stuy area. And so they live on New York Avenue, and Kingston Avenue is just a few avenues over. So it's really very much that community.
Yeah.
And the question was, why is Maurice the foil?
The foil.
I'm not sure if I know what that means.
The jazz musician seems to be juxtaposed to Klaus as a person that is questioning Klaus.
Yeah, I think he's that because of me, because of my sort of like what Camille was talking about earlier. My initial resistance to read my need to sort of want to take this Black person and redefine them to be what I've come to associate with who we are. I mean, I'm always saying we're not a monolith, but I'm the first to put us in a monolith, and to see us as that. And through the play, they both, Klaus sort of kind of, I hesitated calling it How He Found His Blackness because I don't know if I really supported that fully, but he sort of comes at the end to sort of accept more his full identity. And Maurice also gets a lesson of that he really can't shake this guy, and he leaves with, just a little, he grows a little too. So, and that may be part of it. And also through Maurice, I was able to talk more about what I knew, which was how America treats us. You know, that's also why Maurice is there.
Hello. I thought the work was excellent also. Keith and Camila, I wanted you to speak potentially to what you're seeing in the plays, like more of the through line when you were talking about what you learned. I can't pronounce the name of the play, but I very much enjoyed it. But can you speak to more of the through lines about what you saw in each of the plays and the temperature of the plays that we're doing now? Because I guess last Black Fest, or the last one I may have come to, was Facing Our Truth. So a lot of times I feel like when I come to this venue, I'm going to see something that is politically or related to the climate of the country right now. And so I just thought, oh, this is refreshing. This is really awesome. I don't know anything about Oregon. I don't know anything about Germany. I do know about, being a part of the cotillion. Ridiculous. But if you would just speak to that, like what you're seeing in plays now, and if it's related to the climate of the country, because when Facing Our Truth and Trayvon Martin is going on, that's like what we write about. But like now that it's not as hot, we're free to write what we want to write, not the monolith. You know what I mean? So would you just speak to that a little bit?
For me, what I think was so unique, and what was happening today is the gaze, right? Is the gaze at which each of these plays are storytelling from. And I think, Takara, you mentioned it earlier, is that it's talking about identity, but not identity as it relates to the larger dominant, white culture in America, but it's looking at it from a very different gaze, which will emerge different characters, which we know, but yet we don't see enough of. Different stories and set situations, which we know, yet we don't articulate the nuances on an ongoing basis. And then for me, again, through a different gaze, getting a story about sort of a biracial Black German in 1934, like that's, I couldn't even imagine. So it's breaking open this idea of the imagination and how we identify ourselves. Because then, identifying even Blackness in the midst of these three plays, I wouldn't even imagine. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So we're starting to talk about a new receptacle when we talk about Blackness or Black theater, or what Black identity truly means. And that's exciting, right? That's the direction in which we, with which we need to be moving and writing and pushing the boundaries, I think, in our art. So.
If I can also add something to that, I thought it was really, truly lovely to hear the diversity of voices, and I really think it speaks to the evolution of the conversation that we as African American artists are having with the culture. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite phrases is sustain the complexity, that there are many different stories, and I think that for so long we've been sort of pressured and pushed to tell one story, and now what you're seeing is sort of the freedom of expression that you're talking about.
I love it.
Right, and one of the...
And I would actually say, I don't want to cut you off, but I would actually say that what they're talking about is actually revolutionary. It does have the same weight and potency as the Trayvon Martin and everything else. It's like, so I would say it's quite...
I feel like one of the things that we're combating is what I think that we have a cultural disease, I call it WPS, white protagonist syndrome. And I feel like, I definitely have it. Even writing this, the play kept wanting to be about, I kept thinking maybe that it has to be about Walter or about Lisa, or there's another character, Ruth. And I found I had one reading where everyone asked questions about Walter and nothing about Klaus, and I just said I was totally depressed. So when the director who collaborated with me on this, he said, "What you want to work on?" I said, "Well," I told him about WBS, and he was like, "I get it," and that we started cutting and let them support his story, which is what that's what supporting characters do. It doesn't have to be about. Sometimes this is not about you.
Yeah, and even with Ashes, for me, because the world premiere of it happened in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, Contemporary American Theater Festival. And when I had written this play for the commission, I thought, well, only Oregon's gonna do this play. I mean, it's like set in Oregon. It's it's based off of Black people in Oregon, and I didn't think there was gonna be, a need to have the play anywhere else in the country. And it was really interesting to have it in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, because like the KKK is still active down there. I mean, I was talking to a lot of Black people who were like, do not go to that town over on, a few miles away. Or if you go during the day and take somebody with you. This is like 2014. This was just this summer. And then the second thing too, I have this cult leader who's this Black woman, and then people are like, that's so interesting because it's usually like men who run cults, So even in that kind of super niche, like who can be a cult leader, like it's making a statement when she's a Black woman, Breaking boundaries. I know. I was like, way to put somebody in a box. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting to sort of, like have this conversation about, who can be on stage, what conversations can be heard. And, the reason why I love Black Fest is that, I know Keith is dedicated to finding, the stories within the stories, the people within the people, the communities within the communities. And I loved all the plays this evening too, because it was like, it was getting into the layers of the thing and just not sort of, just dealing with the surface. Yeah, because it's so funny, because like the few times that I've traveled overseas, I always get mistaken for being African, and I always get cussed out in the native tongue by someone who thinks I'm African. They never say where, they're just like, you African are here taking my job. And I say, I'm from Kansas. So, I mean, so it was just like interesting, even the first scene in the, the excerpt, to sort of have this relationship between these two Black people. Because, I had this accent, and then when I start talking, then that just like confuses, who's ever cussing me out. And, but, it's happened in Germany, it's happened in Paris. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, so even having that kind of, seeing that kind of conversation on stage for me was just, it was very refreshing, so, yeah.
I just want to say thank you so very much. This was very, very exciting, and it makes me want to live until I'm at least 150 years, at least 150 years old to see all of this work take place. The journey the stories that Black playwrights are writing. You're just an example of what is going on, and some of the places where I work, these conversations aren't even happening. The conversation is about how to put us in the box and how to press a certain button so 1,000 Black people will show up at the same time. Paying $100 a ticket, at least to do that, and the story is not even ours, okay? And I also want to say that I think that Camila Forbes is one of the fiercest sisters around. And I know that, she works consistently, and I know that she is playing backup to folk.
Not for long.
You know, I know she,
Not anymore.
and, you know, and even, you know, like just some of our major off-Broadway houses are not hiring Black women directors, you know. So we need that, we need you, and anybody in this room who is responsible for hiring or can make that kind of a difference, make that difference, because I've seen what happens when sisters collaborate with sisters. Something else just happens that's just absolutely magical. I'm not saying that other magical things don't happen.
Okay, what
that
about when
are
sisters
worthwhile.
collaborate with brothers, though? That's something.
Wait a minute. I need to talk about sisters.
Yes, no, I know.
You know, like I need to talk about sisters.
It's the
I work with
community
y'all
within the
too.
community.
I love y'all. You know, like I absolutely love y'all. But I'm about uplifting women.
And I'll take a job whenever, honestly.
So
I'm here.
anybody who's responsible for that, please hire the sister. She's awesome.
Thank you.
This question is for Camila. I don't know how long you guys had to rehearse this, but I felt like the actors, I don't know if it was the actor's job or your job, but the characters all had strong characterizations. Like I was on there watching or looking at people, you know what I mean? And I don't know if that came from the script or if it came from you or if it was like a collaboration.
That was me, honey.
Yeah.
But what I will say this is that number one, we had amazing, and all the actors said this, and some of them are still here, amazing text to work with as a starting point, like amazing. And then we had some fierce actors who came in today, and literally, you know, we didn't have that long with such layered work. Who made some extremely strong choices. So, you know, it was a community within the community, you know, diversity within diversity, which forced them and challenged them to make choices that they may not ever get to make in kind of other work that they do in, you know, in their everyday career. And I think that was fun, just to speak of the actors, I think that was fun and exciting and challenging also for them.
And great
to play.
to watch.
And great to watch, to play, because they really took it there and played. So that was fun.
For me, it seemed like there seemed to be a running theme with all three of the plays as to how Black people are finding each other. And I just was wondering if that was a conscious choice when you chose the plays, or a conscious choice in choosing the excerpts of the plays.
No, I didn't make a conscious choice about thematically any type of linking. But I did know that Christina and her work and her canon and her creativity often produces something layered and something complex and something provocative. So I could just tell her to bring in a page of anything and it would have been something that would challenge us about identity and history. The same for Lynn and Alex. I just knew that they would bring something that would represent what their politics and their social outlook is. So. And that's what I usually do anyway when I seek out playwrights to work with. I just know who they are. And so I don't often need to see what they're writing. I just know it'll be engaging. So yes.
This is for everyone on the panel. What moments tonight took you by surprise in the audience's reactions? What did you hear that you weren't expecting?
You mean within your own piece?
Within your own piece, sure. Or someone else's.
You know what? I'll say this.
I mean, it's so much to think about.
It is a lot to think about. I was struck by the layers of comedy in your piece, Alex. You know, it's interesting. Obviously, the audience is obviously the last character that you kind of add into the mix, and that kind of struck me as well. I was familiar with the moments of comedy in the other world, but so that was a really interesting surprise for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I was really surprised that, because Keith had a couple of rules. One was 20 minutes and one was 4 characters, and I had 5. And to remove a lot of the scenes I had that I thought really laid the story out, I would have had to use 5 characters. So I had to juggle things around. And that second scene, for me, it's very sort of out of context. A lot of stuff happens before that informs it. And I thought, I'm gonna totally lose them. They're gonna like fall asleep. And you didn't. Like, people were like, right? And even from today, when you guys read it, I was like, oh, it's making sense. And the things that you were saying about it, I was going, oh, okay. I was like,
I mean, I will say that, you know, I was standing in the back and I was kind of looking at you guys, and I noticed that you guys were into it, and that made me happy.
So maybe then we would like to have a little reception so we can talk. It might be 5 minutes shorter than perhaps normally, but so I hope you will stay here, we will do something. But I really would like to say again, thank you to New Black Festival, great
Again, 2 things. One, Monday, October 17th at 6:30.
November.
See,
You're going
got
back.
too much going on. Monday, November 17th, is the premiere of Hands Up, 6 playwrights, 6 testaments. 2 of the playwrights I mentioned earlier are here. It's going to be a pretty amazing evening. Carl Cofield will be the directing. There'll be a talk back as well, and I believe that's going to be completely live streamed. So please come to that. And I believe Frank did not mention that the reception includes wine.
Yes! November 20th, as a reminder, is the opening of your play, Keith. Pitbulls at Rattlesnake. So support.